a concept we call win to the power of win.
It's such an aspirational concept that it would mean look for the solution that is bigger than both of what you're seeing.
Just like we say we measure success there in that scenario by profit, there's no reason why we cannot have several other drivers that holistically give us a measure of success.
Repositioning how we view technology and taking win to the power of win at this critical moment in time and building it into how we plan for the future.
It allows us to evolve past this level as a species, and also just allows us to benefit not just from the wins that we create, but also benefit from the wins that others create, because we're all doing so exponentially. Hello everybody, and welcome back to episode 3 of the Emergent Humanity Code podcast. If you don't know us yet, we are a growing collective who believe we can change the world by changing ourselves. My name is Melanie, and I'm here once again with the rest of the Emergent Humanity Code team, Cal.
Hi everyone.
Marlon.
Hi there.
And Priya.
Hello.
On this week's episode, we'll be diving into one of the foundational principles of Emergent, a concept we call win to the power of win. So we'll be talking, what is this win to the power of win concept, and why is it so foundational to who we are? Why is win to the power of win fundamental for the future of humanity and the future of our own individual lives? How does this principle show up in all categories of emergent life? What are some of the challenges associated with the win to the power of win concept? And what can we do to create and leverage more win to the power of wins in our lives? So if you want to know more about how you can create more exponential wins for yourself and the people in your lives, stick around because we'll be unpacking all of this in more detail. So Priya, I'm going to start with you. Being the primary founder of Emergent and the person really that has uncovered and coined this term win to the power of win, can you tell us, what is it?
Yes, I stumbled upon this concept of a zero-sum game a few years ago. And it's basically the idea that there's a winner and a loser. So if you think about a winner having +1 and then the loser having -1, and they level out at 0. And I thought it was so fascinating because we took that idea and we used it beyond just games and sport and normal organized competition. We actually took this idea of win-loss and a zero-sum game into so many things in our lives. So if you think about just the idea of competing for scarce resources, whether it's many people competing for the same job or promotion, or in a relationship, a couple competing to be right or to have their preference over the other person's preference. So just this idea of win-lose dynamics and zero-sum game has been pervasive. And then we can see the emergence of the compromise concept, because, of course, when you have a winner and a loser, someone's always unhappy. And so compromise then is the concept of everybody trades off a little bit. So you keep a little bit and you lose a little bit, and you end up somewhere in the middle with some mishmash of what you wanted, and the other person or people have a little bit of what they wanted, but they lose some as well. And it's obvious that that doesn't really leave anyone feeling very happy. The idea of compromise just always has this feeling of I'm losing something. And then we can see that that evolved to this idea of win-win dynamics. So in a lot of business concepts, business teams, just different areas of our lives, we're used to this idea of a win-win. And win-win is basically saying then, okay, moving from win-loss to compromise to now saying, how do we try and make sure that if one person or party in a transaction or a particular objective is winning, the other person is also winning, so that everybody leaves feeling like they've gained and they haven't traded off. And that's a really nice evolution. Where it falls short, though, is it only takes the immediate people or the immediate stakeholders in a particular transaction or objective into account. And so, as I was mulling all of this over many months and maybe even years, I started having conversations with Cal, and we started just thinking about this compromise win-win. And then we actually came up with this concept of win to the power of win. And basically, what that is saying is it's a next natural evolution, because we're used to thinking about in business this idea of exponential wins and exponential gains, and in personal development as well, the idea of exponentiality is prevalent. So win to the power of win becomes like a really natural next step in evolution, but it also actually feels like a very easy to latch onto heuristic to say, how do we actually look to win by creating wins for every other person or stakeholder in that particular transaction or objective, but also look even wider than just the people that seem to be directly or immediately impacted. So those could be the other people around those immediate stakeholders, but it could also even extend to the planet. It could extend to future generations. We really start to take a macro view. And with exponential thinking, we can take a macro view. So that's win to the power of win.
Yeah, I really love that. I also think it touches on, the concept of game theory, which is where the idea of the zero-sum game originates. And in game theory, what you're essentially trying to do is maximize your worst case scenario payoff in any game. So you're considering what is your opponent's best move, and then what's the best move that I can make to reduce or mitigate my risks and negative results from there. So it's the best possible outcome for myself in the worst case scenario. But I think, as we discussed, like in episode 1, where we said, if we are going to redefine profit, for example, then win to the power of win is like the principle that's underpinning that. So if we're saying the way we do business, profit has to include the benefits to all the stakeholders involved, to all the parties directly and indirectly impacted by, say, a transaction. Then in essence, we're saying that is a win to the power of win. It's not merely the customer wins because they've got a product, the business wins because they've made money. It's looking at, okay, what are the environmental wins from this transaction? What are the unforeseen third-party wins? For example, how are our future generations and children going to be impacted by this transaction? What are the societal wins from this transaction? And I do believe that this is the future of the economic and social landscape that we are trying to attain.
It's interesting because personally, I would say this concept of win to the power of win really sort of raises new questions in my mind, because I've always been a very sort of competitive person. But then I realized that the key to developing so many new systems or methods of doing things that sort of benefits everybody, all stakeholders and all everybody that's impacted by decisions or choices that we make, is really collaboration rather than competition. I think collaboration is really the key here. It's about understanding that my true success in anything is really rooted or integrated in the success of others along with it. That's where I really gain true success. It's not success for myself in isolation or more importantly at the expense of someone else. So I think it's about mutual gratification and benefit. And to attain that mutual gratification and benefit, I don't mean mutually necessarily just with two parties or three parties that are maybe decision makers or choice makers within a particular process, but it's understanding that every impactee, every person, every component, every aspect of the planet that is impacted by the choices and the decisions that we make. It's that success, that true success is understanding that all of those components, which is why I think we say for the highest good of all, in as almost as a mantra in everything that we do. So for me, yeah, the collaboration is the critical component here. I think when I think to my own experiences a little bit in the professional environment, as I've said before, I've worked in a public sector consulting environment where I consulted for government entities on financial reporting and governance. And when we started, there was very much, or as we went through it, there was very much a template or a blueprint of how you did things. But I found that as we changed our mindset and, in looking to add value to our clients, and to improve our own work processes, we thought outside of that box, outside of that blueprint and that template. And we formulated new strategies and approaches. And really the outcome from there, I found, was not just a win for us or for the client. It was really an exponential win all around. In that scenario, I think for us, it was obviously profitable because the client was satisfied with our work, so it was profitable. Our contracts got extended, we got referred to other clients, etc., etc. So we generated further income from that shift in mentality. The clients themselves as well were very pleased because they were now getting a higher quality of product. The client being the government or the municipal entities, local government. And then I think from there, because local government was getting a better quality product from us as service providers, they were now able to service or they were able to improve the service delivery to the community that they serve. So they were able to better achieve their goals because of that. And as they produced better financial reporting results, better governance outcomes, etc., national government started to take notice. And then greater confidence was invested in this entity, in this municipal entity, and they got further funding from national government, from corporates, from the private sector to further their endeavors, which there again resulted in even better service delivery. And so I started to reflect on the projects that I did, I realized that simple shift in mindset, that change in mentality, and that creating this new model didn't just change it for me or how we do it, which may have been my intention as we started, but it had this knock-on effect where every impactee from the work that I performed was now left exponentially better off than they were before. So I really saw the power and the ability that this tool, that this concept can really touch and improve everybody and society as a whole.
No, absolutely. And I think in the context of work, in the corporate space, this concept of win-win is a term or a concept that's widely used and sometimes even overused to convey the importance of just rejecting the premise that for me to win, someone else needs to lose or others need to lose. The reason I say overused is because it's also sometimes been hijacked in some ways to create this landscape of repackaging losses for others as wins or creating wins for some people, so shareholders and customers as an example, that result in wins for them, but a net loss for the whole. So, I think, Cal, you touched on it earlier, the example of creating wins across the board. If you look at an example of, let's say, an oil company that creates new technology that intuits its customers' needs and reduces fueling costs and creates these wins across the board for both themselves and their customers. But then they go spill thousands of gallons of oil into the ocean every year. It's actually a win for the company and a win for the customer, but it's an overall net loss for the entire planet over time. So I think win to the power of win is really the next evolution in creating exponential wins, creating sustainable wins. It's just understanding that everybody's playing the game. It's not just businesses and customers. It's not just Man United players on the field and Liverpool players on the field. It's the fans, it's the audience, it's the commentators. So for us in society, it's society, it's the planet, it's future generations that we can't see. It's everybody playing the game and everybody being able to win. So definitely an evolution of the win-win concept. So that actually brings me to the next question. Cal, as the co-founder of Emergent, can you tell us a little bit around why is win-win so powerful and why is it fundamental to the future of humanity, but also for our own thriving?
Yeah, Mel, I think when we're talking about future, I think the natural insert here is then technology, right? And because we're at such a critical inflection point with technology at the moment, especially with AI, which appears to be, the most imminent of these tools, it's now almost like a point in time where we have to make a decision of which direction we're going in. So, for example, with AI, I think a lot of the fear that's kind of surrounding it at the moment are all essentially zero sum scenarios. For example, you're saying AI is going to take our jobs and now we're going to be rendered homeless and poor. AI is going to learn to emulate human emotion, and that's going to be a substitute for our real relationships. And so we're at a point in time where, yes, all these possibilities, they do exist, they do lie ahead, but now we can actually make the decision and go, how can we actually use the technology, use AI to create win to the power of win systems? How can we program it to actually enable us to have more win to the power of win paradigms? So, for example, if we take the jobs, AI is going to take our jobs. Instead of thinking AI is going to take our jobs, now we are jobless. If we think about it in a more expansive way of most people are complaining every day about the fact that they have to go to work. Most people are complaining that they're overworked, that they don't want to live this life where you work, you work, you work, and then you die. So, how can we use our technology to say, what if we didn't have to work as a society because we have AI? What if we didn't have to work so hard because we have new technology? What would we do then? Would we focus on purely enjoying the planet and all of its beauty? Would we just focus on how do we become the best fellow humans? How do we delve deeper into our relationships with each other? So I think it's really, when we're looking at the future, just about repositioning how we view technology and taking win to the power of win at this critical moment in time and building it into how we plan for the future.
It's interesting, Cal. You talk to our perception of AI. I think a lot of the fear really it's based in our insecurity, because you just mentioned now that it's could be such a powerful tool if used correctly, but yet AI in itself, the fear really comes from is that AI is a reflection of us, our beliefs, or how we do things, how we think, how we feel. Its inputs are people. People are we input, we give it the data. So really, our fear of AI is a fear of ourselves almost. It's a fear of how we view ourselves. It's thinking about uh, something bigger or stronger or more powerful, then we naturally fear it. We fear it because it can take away from us. But if we realize that it can add to us, if we think of ourselves as a collective, that it can bring it together and it can reflect everything we can do, then our entire perception changes. It's like, we spoke a little bit about sports now. It's like if you're playing rugby or you're playing American football, and you've now got this massive guy that joins the opposition's team, then you're naturally afraid because you got to go up against him. But now, if that same guy joins your team, then you're now excited. You feel empowered. You feel stronger because. So for me, that AI is that guy. It's just about understanding that how to use it, and we can bring it over and realize that it is in our team. It can enable us. It can equip us to do so much more. Then that fear naturally subside, and we can use it for, as you said, expansive growth, creating better lives for all of us. And I think it's a very important part of this whole win to the power of win concept that we're trying to create, or not trying to create, trying to develop and try to expand on into the world.
Yeah, I think that's so powerful, because it's actually saying if we're afraid of AI, it's because we're clear that AI is a reflection of where we are currently. So actually, we're afraid of ourselves. We're afraid of what we're seeing in our own behaviors, in our own systems, and the things that we're perpetuating. And so it's that idea of, if you don't like the mirror, you don't change the mirror, you change the source, you change the thing that is being reflected in the mirror. And so if we're not comfortable with where we think AI is going, it's a pointing to the fact that we need to change ourselves. And what's important there for me is these narratives that we create, these systems, the stories we tell ourselves are really important, because they start to drive everything we build. They drive the way we set up our family structures, our relationships, our businesses. I mean, all the things we've been talking about. And even when we start looking at those narratives, it's important to understand what drove us there, what was underlying some of those narratives. I heard this really nice term of a generator function as well. So what is the generator function of those narratives? What influenced our thoughts and our thinking processes in the narratives we created, and how do we go about shifting those underlying foundations, shifting the narratives, and therefore shifting what AI reflects back to us for the future. So that becomes really important. And there's also a really nice quote that links to this in business. There's this quote that says, organizations don't change, people change. So it's still this idea that if we want big systemic change in a business or in society, we have to change at an individual level first, or at least in parallel, while we're trying to change these big systems and big things in society. And that's some of the ways that I think win to the power of win can be this really nice heuristic, a nice, easy to grab onto philosophy that we can start thinking about. Because as we start to think about how do we create wins for ourselves, we can start looking at, does the win create wins for other people that I'm able to see, other stakeholders, but also those that I can't see? Future generations, planet, but also just the wider society or organizations that we're part of today.
Yeah, and Priya, just as you're saying that, thinking about what got us to the point that we're at right now and how do we move to the next level gets me thinking about just the evolutionary perspective, and how evolution is really just the changing of our genetic material over time to adapt to new environments. So if you think of us as humans, we have a prefrontal cortex, which is a major differentiator, which allows us to make sense of complex information, make choices, make decisions, have assessments that consider the macro environment. So if you think of it in the current ecosystem, a lion doesn't actually know whether it's hunting an animal that's an endangered species or an animal that's overpopulated, as an example. It doesn't know the macro effect of its behavior. So it's not that it knows better but is ignoring to do anything that it needs to do better. It actually physically doesn't have the capacity to do anything differently. Whereas we have evolved over time to be able to see the macro effects of our actions. And then we have the computing capacity to be able to go and do something about it. And while we have that computing capacity, we also have this primitive drive for survival and survival of self. So I think in learning to create more win to the power of wins, it allows us to evolve past this level as a species, and also just allows us to benefit not just from the wins that we create, but also benefit from the wins that others create, because we're all doing so exponentially. So yeah, I love that perspective.
Yeah, Belle, you were saying this sort of primitive mentality, this very almost, I don't know if it's instinctive or not, but it's a mentality of thinking of self first. And I think so many of the challenges we face are because we are looking out for ourselves or a small group of ourselves. As humans, we tend to separate ourselves either by geographic boundaries or by class or various other mechanisms. We separate ourselves into these clusters and then we compete with each other from there based on these clusters. This is a very typical win-lose or zero-sum game philosophy. This only benefits a sector of society or a group of people because somebody has to win and somebody has to lose in that. If we separate and we branch off into teams in that scenario, somebody has to be defeated in this. So I think for us, what we're trying to do with this concept is we want to start to think of the entire collective. We want to start unearthing new approaches to everything we do that is now starting to benefit all of us. We are now not segregated in our minds the way we do. If I think like on an international scale, for example, countries are often competing with each other for superiority or dominance of some sort. And this inevitably again leaves a winner and a loser, which means the loser in this scenario will leave, or sometimes even the winner, results with millions of people being left worse off as a result of this competition. Just the fact that these countries are competing, whether it's warfare or something not even as extreme as warfare, but millions of people are left worse off as a result of us creating competition. But when countries then decide to now collaborate together, so they create international relations amongst each other, and then they both realize what's their strengths and weaknesses. They're able to optimize their strengths. They're able to mitigate their weaknesses. And ultimately, they're able to create a better life for all of the citizens on both those countries. Now, obviously, this is a very sort of win-win scenario because we're looking at two countries, but there's no reason why this cannot be adapted and scaled and broadened to the entire planet as a whole, where if we create these international relations amongst everybody, everything, even international relations with things that cannot communicate verbally with us, as in the planet, etc. If we consider all of those things, then everything that's impacted, its needs, its requirements, what's its best life, what's its best way forward, then we create this entire new system of doing things, and all of us benefit. It's creating that that idea that's ingrained in us that success for me has to mean that you and you and you and everybody and everything around me needs to move in the same trajectory, if not absolute success, but towards success at least. The idea shouldn't be like I'm moving towards my gains and I'm good, job done. It's a collective, and I don't really win if I don't look at the collective and apply that. So I think that's where the exponential growth really starts to impact and touch every area of our life and really start to create that healthier society for all of us, all of us.
Sure, guys. These perspectives are so compelling around the story of win to the power of win and why we should be doing it and what impact it's going to have and benefit for all of us. If I look at Emergent, the life areas that we discuss, we look at all areas from mindset and finance to health and parenting. Priya, which area would you say, or areas would you say, win to the power of win has the most impact? And how would you say those areas impact us the most?
Yeah, so I think the concept win to the power of win lends itself to every area of our lives. And it's such an aspirational concept that it would mean, we'd have to really reflect and continually try to be better and better at it and live up to it. So difficult for me to choose maybe a favorite area. But there is an example that comes to mind, and it's very practical. It's relationships, and it's how we can apply it or start to apply it, at least in the relationship dynamic. And actually, it's an example that a few years ago, I was sharing this concept of win to the power of win with some colleagues. We were actually traveling for work, traveling separately. We happened to meet up, coincidentally, we happened to meet up at the airport in Dubai, and it was a 1 a.m. conversation that morning. And somehow we landed on the idea that neither of us thought compromise was a workable solution in most things. You know, everybody feels like they're leaving having lost something. And then I shared this concept of win to the power of win. And Masala, who is one of the colleagues with me, he listened to it and he was like, wow, I absolutely love that. And I was drawing the concept in the book. And he said, I absolutely love that, because the example then he proceeded to give was, he said, it's like if I wanted a red feature wall painted in my house and my wife wanted a green feature wall. Compromise would say you either did a brown wall, which is just a combination of the two colors, or you did half a green wall and half a red wall, where this idea of win to the power of win might be, let's look for a solution that actually is bigger and better than both of our ideas and we both win. And the outcome might be that we don't have a feature wall at all. We knock down the wall and we have a floor to ceiling glass wall that is stunning and allows you to enjoy the view. And then I loved that example as well. I thought it was so practical around how you can start to, just in a relationship of two people, look for the solution that is bigger than both of what you're seeing at that time. And if you start to extend that to beyond just the two people, you know, to others who might be impacted by it, the children in that case, or people who visit the home, or and so on and so forth, you know, there are many ways to look at it, and look at how it can be beneficial for many more people. So I absolutely loved that example, and I think we can start to apply ourselves very practically in all areas and look for the solution that we're not seeing, that is bigger and greater than what we're putting on the table at the moment. So yeah, shout out to Masala for that example.
Yeah, Priya, I think you know somebody's really passionate when they're talking about this at 1 a.m. in the airport. So I think it's something obviously close to your heart, and it is for all of us. You gave us the example of relationships and the concept of compromise really doesn't satisfy or please anybody, and that once we open our eyes or open our minds up to new opportunities, there's probably, as you said in your scenario, the when you develop this new method or new way, or in your example, the new wall, or perhaps no wall, or a glass wall, or finding a better way, you probably don't even want to go back to what you originally wanted in the first place, because this new way is so much better. It pleases the other person. It pleases you. It comes with so many other benefits. So the relationship one is interesting. And I also think in terms of relationships, relationships is such a, a broad term. I think relationships are everywhere in life. When we say relationships, we think of very personal relationships or intimate relationships, but relationships exist all around. We are such an interconnected society that relationships exist everywhere, all around. Even if I think of whether it's friends or family, but going bigger, even businesses have a relationship with other businesses. They have relationships with consumers. They have relationships with the planet. They have various relationships. And I think one great example of win to the power of win, or how it was really played out in practice, was, I think, about 20 years ago, just under 20 years ago, 2006, if memory serves me correct. There was a merger between Disney and Pixar. And before that, Disney and Pixar were complete rivals, mortal enemies, you might say. Everything they did was trying to one up each other, trying to defeat each other. But somehow they sat down together and figured out a better way of doing things. And Disney was the promotional and distribution powerhouse. They were around for decades longer. They were a dynasty in the animation industry. Whereas Pixar was more the young cool kid with new ideas. They came up with they had innovative ways. They had a lot more creativity in their thought process, in their ideas. And those two, they as I said, they fought each other for years. But when the leaders were able to sit down, they realized there was so much more that could be done by them collaborating. And I think just by their collaborations, not just Disney alone or Pixar alone were improved. Both Disney was massively improved. Pixar was massively improved, I think, because they were able to integrate both aspects of it, the strength and the distribution and the abilities, the sheer market reach that Disney had. They were able to really leverage that, but they were also able to combine it with the creative and innovative aspects of digital animation that Pixar brought to the table. And so from there, the companies, I think both their profits went through the roof for quite a period of time. So they obviously gained. I think us as end users or as consumers of the entertainment, we saw firstly a greater quantity of quality entertainment, because as I said, Pixar were creating this with the advent of CGI and things like that. They were creating movies like Toy Story and things like that that really brought a whole new way of creating this entertainment for us. So us as the viewers, we were enthralled because we were now getting so much more of this content. Whereas Pixar before, they were able to create it, but they didn't have the strength or the market reach to do this regularly and to really get it out there and produce a lot of it, which Disney brought in. And I think also for Pixar, from Pixar's point of view, Disney brought in a lot of structure and know-how and systems in place. So it almost guided and channeled that creativity in the correct angles. So I think it really benefited both the companies. It benefited the consumers as well, but I think also importantly, it benefited the animation industry as a whole, because it raised the bar. It created a new way of creating this sort of this animation movies. It really encourage people to think in innovative ways. For decades before that, it had been done a certain way. But now there was this whole new standard. I think consumers were so much happier. There was such a shot pumped into the arm of the consumers where they were excited again. Animated movies took off, and just everybody involved was so much better for this merger. Even down to the a lot of the employees of both organizations said they felt so much more empowered because of this. Whatever their respective organizations, wherever they lack or their weakness was, the merger, the other side now brought that to the table. So because both sides brought different complementary angles to the table, they were able to make one amazing product and really change the game there. So I think I always use that as an example in my mind of, if those two enemies or rivals were able to sit down and figure out this whole new way, and it really truly was beneficial to everybody, surely we can adapt this throughout our societal challenges, issues, just everything we do. We should have that in mind, where we can improve it for everybody involved, everybody impacted.
Sure, Marlon, I love that example so much because what I'm taking from that is, in essence, instead of capitalizing on your competitors' weaknesses, as has been the case in traditional marketing, in the way we've been doing business for decades, if not centuries, and it's now shifting that to going, how can we actually be more intentional about taking the best parts of different players' strengths and then amalgamating into something more, something greater than what any of those individuals could have done alone, as you said, The other part that I love is that it's also almost like the win to the power of win concept is, it's like shifting the actual players in the game. It's becoming more inclusive to say it's not just business and customer or business X versus business Y. We're now being inclusive in the definition to say that all those who will be impacted by a transaction or by a business are now included, and they start to play in that game. So whether it's children, planet, industry, as you said, it moved the industry forward, it moved entertainment and animation forward. So yeah, that was a really powerful example for me.
Yeah, absolutely. And Cal, just hearing you talk about this zero sum game, competitive system that's becoming outdated. If I think of my own context and my own example and my career, it's definitely shown up for me there. There's many times over my career where I've just made it a very deliberate part of who I am to show up in a way where I'm adding value to any environment. And it's one of the things I always share with my team, that a lot of my mentors have shared with me. And it's just around making sure that I'm always adding value. And I think the best way to look at it is to go, the information that I'm sharing is not actually the commodity. It's actually the value that I'm sharing that's the commodity. So a lot of people will feel like if I've learned a skill and I now share it with somebody else, I'm taking a -1 from my skill and they are taking a +1 because they've now benefited from my skill and I've lost something because I've given it to them. But if we look at it as value being the commodity, then actually I added value to one extra person. They gained value from the experience that I shared with them. They then are able to add further value because they'll have an additional perspective. And then there are actually no -1s anywhere because we're all just calculating our worth or our value based on how much value we can add to others. So I think that's definitely another way that we can see win to the power of win in a way that can support everyone to make different decisions. Also, Kala, just on that point, you spoke very much about the perspective of game theory and all those types of things. But for your area of your life, what do you think win to the power of win would be the most impactful?
The easiest area that win to the power of win has shown up for me is a very practical and I think essential one for most of us, which is health and well-being. And I think a simple example of a win-lose situation would be that traditional concept of like dieting, right? And in that concept, I've isolated a goal. I've said, for example, I want to lose weight. And now I have to sacrifice my desire for a certain food, a less satisfying food, and then hopefully I get this desired outcome of weight loss, right? So it's an isolated goal. It's an action that I don't really want to do. So it's a big sacrifice for me and hopefully getting a certain outcome. With win to the power of win, I think the point here was to shift the goal to something that was more holistic. So it's not to say that you shouldn't have those minor goals or isolated goals of, I want to lose weight, I want to have clear skin or better hair growth or whatever that is, but to shift the perspective and look at it holistically where it includes that, but also includes all these other areas of wellness. So now you start to look at this area of wellness differently, and you can also then solve for it differently. So for me personally, what I did was I started getting into research of what are the smaller habits that I can make in my life that are simple, but are going to compound and net me higher results. So it's no longer about a sacrifice, but it's about compounding small habits that don't feel like much, but they're going to compound and give me better results at the end. So for example, whether it's, taking a 2-minute cold shower, eating more whole foods, including that in your diet, just moving more, taking the stairs, the simple one we all know, taking the stairs instead of the lift. A popular topic of discussion in the health community now is, how do I eat more foods that take care of my gut microbiome? And once my gut microbiome is all set and well, it's gonna, expand and result in better outcomes for the rest of my body. So suddenly, the impact of all of those minor habits have resulted in something exponential. And that's one component of it. And then the second component where I think win to the power of win really shows up is now that I've approached this in a holistic sense, I've not just achieved an isolated goal of I've lost some weight, I've cleared up my skin. Holistically, my health is better, which means I'm better rested. I have more energy for work. I have more stamina, say, to play with my nephew. I have more focus and more clarity. So when I'm sitting across the table from a friend and we're having a deep conversation, I'm fully there. I'm fully present with them because I'm more focused. And so for me now, the results are no longer just physical. They've actually expanded into multiple areas of my life. And that's where Win to Power of Win shows up really practically.
Wow, those are some really practical examples of micro ways that we can actually apply this concept into our lives today if we really wanted to. And those examples being so practical and powerful, it also gets me asking the question, what are some of the challenges that you think applying Win to the Power of Win we'd face applying Win to the Power of Win, and then how do you think we could overcome them?
I think inherently, the approach to life that we have as a society is one that we've inherited from an existing landscape, an existing approach to the way we do things. And as humans, we're so used to thinking in this manner. We're so used to thinking within these paradigms and understanding success and what thriving means through this viewpoint. As Marlon mentioned earlier, I think it was a perfect example to say we're so threatened by AI because that's the way we built the system, because we feel threatened by each other. And so this also kind of draws us back to, the value of parallel practice, where we actually need to shift our mindset almost completely in a way that might feel like it's going against the current sometimes. So I think the biggest drawback at the moment is that we've been so programmed to think in this way. It's now about going, how do I shift and get out of this approach?
Yeah, I think it'll definitely be a feeling of going against the current, Cal, because it's exactly that. We have that conditioning within us. Everything of our society is created on a competitive basis. It's created all our measurements, all our metrics of success and achievement. If we look at anything, if we look at business, if we look at organizations that we talk about in industry, we say this is a Fortune 500 company. Why do we say that? Oh, we say that because that's our measurement of their success. That's their measurement of their growth, because they've made X amount of money, or they've have a certain shareholder price, etc., etc. That's what we measure as success. But really, if we change our mentality and we change our mindset, then there's no reason why, just like we say we measure success there in that scenario by profit, there's no reason why we cannot have several other drivers that holistically give us a measure of success or achievement in all our lives. So I think that's the big thing. It's changing our mentality, because everything is created like that. Everything of our society is underpinned by those principles. So it's very hard for us to go item by item or area by area and say, don't make this the metric of success, make that. But rather than that, when we change our mindset to understand that you're not just successful if you've only succeeded, but you failed in these other components, but we've just ignored it. We haven't counted that. We've only put this one item as a metric for success and you've hit it and that's it. Rather, if we create different inputs to how we value success, in fact, even perhaps a different definition even of success, then once we redefine success to incorporate all of these aspects of, as we said, your impact, everything that you as an individual, as a business, as just as a citizen of the planet, everything that you impact should be left better, or you should at least aspire to leave it better, or make it better with your presence and your actions and your decisions. So for me, I think it all starts with and the biggest challenge will be to change this mindset that we've had for centuries and create this new way of thinking that we will only succeed when we all succeed. That's the only metric of success, is I made everybody better.
Yeah, and I think for me, part of the challenge is even what's coming through in this conversation. It feels big in the as a next shift, but it also feels quite subtle. So even when we think of examples, some of it can feel like, okay, but is that sort of a win-win scenario, or or are we really stretching ourselves to think win to the power of win? So part of the challenge is just that discomfort. It's like taking this new concept and then reapplying it consistently and saying, am I just trying to package the concept to sound like I'm doing win to the power of win? Like Mel's point earlier, am I hijacking it, or am I really looking for who are the stakeholders that I typically wouldn't see? What are the stakeholders that I typically wouldn't see? And can I bring them into my realm of awareness and start thinking about how I'm creating success that is success and wins for all, exponentially. And I think then, when we debate this as well, and certainly when people listen to this, you might think practically like, okay, so if we've got a football game on this afternoon, how in the world do you have win to the power of win happening on the field? There's going to be a winner or a loser, a winner and loser, or, people who it's going to be a drawn game. And then I think you actually can't take the stock standard game and just apply win to the power of win to that. Maybe we actually have to change the game. Maybe we have to reconstruct the rules of the game. And that can feel very daunting. So it might feel like, okay, now I've got to change the sport games. I've got to change the economic system. I've got to change the work construct. So then I go into like, maybe the challenge is actually, how do we start with self? Cal used some really nice examples. Can we start moving from isolated decisions to more inclusive ways of looking at our own health objectives and life objectives? At work, can we be more inclusive of wider and wider stakeholder groups in our business areas? So just starting with self and trying to apply this principle a little more clearly in our daily lives. And I think one of the pieces that helps with starting with self is it helps to join a community. It helps to, whether it's this community or it's just people that you gravitate towards, family members, friends, starting to be around people who really aspire to having an evolved perspective, a different way of living, joining that community, talking about stuff like this, testing, trying these ideas out. That helps to help have this catch on as a concept, and the idea of winning by creating wins for others. So yeah.
Priya, it's interesting that you mentioned the example of a sport game, and we have to recreate the game, because I've also thought about this quite extensively, because I said no, but surely there's some areas of our life that they have to be competition based, and sport is one of them. There has to be a winner and a loser. You often hear a commentator or it's a sports phrase where they'll say both teams played really well, but unfortunately, somebody had to be a loser today. Somebody had to lose in the game. But I think that when we're looking at this concept, I don't think it's really necessarily that we need to change the game, the rules of the game, or how the game is set up. I think what needs to change really is how we view the game. So how do we view success of the game? Now, yes, the game is two teams or two players competing against each other. But I find, like in my personal life, I have friends who we've all competed at sports, so previous athletes, or competed at a high level. And even to this day, in our slightly past our prime years, we still like to catch up and play and we still play full on. We play it as competitively as anything, with nobody watching or everybody watching. But then if you ask us an hour after the game or the next day after the game, hey, you guys played yesterday, who won? Honestly, most of the time we couldn't tell you. Because for us, the metric or the measurement of success of that game was not the game, just the game itself. For us, it was about having the exercise, the workout. Man, we woke up a good sweat. It's about having a good social before, after the game. It's about if there was an audience watching, it's about that we entertained people. They enjoyed watching us compete to our best of our abilities. Sometimes there's youngsters around and we're like, okay, yes, they learned, and I chatted to one of the youngsters after the game and he told me, man, I learned how to do this and that. So I've now passed the skill on to somebody else. So a lot of the times we look back and say, man, yesterday was an awesome day, and we don't know who won the game. So for me, really, it's just a mindset. It's a mindset. And I know it wasn't always this way. It wasn't that way in the past. But now understanding that there's so many inputs to it. There's so many things that make it good or bad, or successful or unsuccessful. There's so many inputs than just the scoreboard. The scoreboard is just one component, and it's an isolated component. When we integrate everything into it, then we realize, was it good? Was it bad? Did we enjoy it? Did everybody benefit from this experience? So I think shifting our mindset, creating that lens where we view it as, we don't have to now say, oh, I'm going to tone down my level of competitiveness or whatever the case is in a game. We still compete, we enjoy, but we understand that our enjoyment comes from the experience. It comes from all the intangibles that are happening around us. I think that's where we measure success. And if we do that, then I don't think the game itself in this scenario needs to change.
We've been using a lot of sports analogies today, and it's
Yeah, I love it. That's my favorite thing of this
I
podcast.
know, right? So it's also making me think of cricket, because just speaking of not needing to change the rules, but actually change the lens, if you think of cricket, there's just so many unwritten rules of engagement that are so much more important than winning or losing, because the game of cricket is so much bigger than that. And often, if a player operates in win-lose mentality and compromises one of those rules of engagement, immediately the game looks at it in a very different way, because of the fact that the rules of engagement is not just winning or losing. The game is so much more. So we may not immediately be able to change the rules of all the games we play, but if we look at it in the context of the way we do with cricket, if we just change the culture and the unsaid rules and the unwritten rules and the way we show up, then you're right, it feels like we can start making the shifts without having to just change the rules. We can start by doing a little bit of both.
And I'm really excited to see your love of cricket coming through in this conversation, Mel.
I will have to learn to love sport if I have to be in this community. No, and I'm just thinking, part of being emergent is really just refining the way we ask questions, thinking of things in a new way, being open to innovative ways of thinking of things. So, for anyone who's watching, if you're thinking of a solution or something's come to mind and there's a challenge that you're thinking of, that you either think of a way that we can overcome it or ways we can create new cultures, we'd love to hear from you. So please drop us a comment, reach out to one of us. Like, being emergent is really just asking the questions and doing more and showing up in the best way we can. So we'd love to hear more from you guys. But yes, moving on, I think, we talk about this all the time. We've got these heavy concepts that we're discussing. They are very big. We try our best to have practical solutions as well as see this in a micro and macro way. But it's really important for us as a team to apply whatever concept we're talking about in a meaningful way in our own lives. So, team, I'm going to ask you before we go, what's the one thing that you feel that you can do to create and leverage more win to the power of wins in our lives this week? Marlon, I'll start with you.
Well, I think for me, when I look at the concept of win to the power of win, for me to really create that or to implement that in my own life, I need to understand what is everybody and everything's win. And I realized that, through creating this community, this growing community at Emergent, that a lot of us have different perspectives. We have different backgrounds. So we may even have we probably have different wins in our own life. So for me to fully understand that, I want to really get a sense of perspective from everybody. So I think I want to actively go out into the community that we've created, try to get a feel and a background to learn more about, particularly about maybe environments or influences or backgrounds that are different from mine, so that I can understand to fully implement a concept like win to the power of win, where everybody collectively wins. Then I need to understand what is a win for somebody else and why is it different from mine. So for me, I think definitely it's going out into our emergent community, but just into the world in general, and learning a bit about people, their backgrounds, they understand what do they value, and sort of adjust my mindset and my concepts. Maybe even look at adjusting or adding or taking away or amending our values to a certain extent to incorporate or look to be more inclusive, because it can't be, I think we four of us here had a conversation, but even that there were areas that we differed on slightly. So the larger the community, surely the greater sort of dimensions or the greater chances of differing versions of win. So I think it's about going out into the world and understanding what that means for the community that I interact with, that I know, and that's around me.
For me, I think I've got two examples. One is a very practical work example. So of recent, I've been experiencing a lot of days where I feel like there's just not enough hours in the day. And I'm feeling quite inspired by your perspective, Marlon, and even Cal, I think you touched on this quite significantly, just around not viewing AI and advancements as a threat, but actually viewing it as something that we can leverage in a meaningful way. So I am going to use ChatGPT to maximize my hours in the day and just start leveraging AI in a meaningful way in order to get some more efficiency in my workspace. And then in terms of my personal life, there's a quote that I love from Gandhi that says, "The best way to find yourself is to lose yourself in the service of others." So for me, just talking about the commodity and just the commodity being adding value to others rather than sharing information or giving away information, the more wins that I can create for the people around me. So every interaction I have this week, just ask myself, am I really adding value to this environment, to this person, this place? And just creating more wins in that way. So that would be a big win for me.
Those are such cool ones, guys. And I think I'm definitely going to steal some of those for myself as well. I think personally, I feel like our days are made up of the series of decisions and negotiations. What I want to do this week based on our conversation, I want to, when you hit the fork in the road and you're thinking like, do I go this way or do I go that way? Do I make this choice or that choice? I want to be able to evaluate the options that I'm not seeing that will potentially yield me a win to the power of win result. An example that maybe comes to mind here, during the week, I say a friend and I are deciding to grab dinner together. And I want to go to this restaurant. A friend of mine wants to go to maybe a restaurant that's closer to their house or something like that. How I would now look at this is to say, what is the third possible option that I'm not seeing here? And in this case, it might be that, and this is very hypothetical, it might be that I love to cook, right? Again, very hypothetical, not at all real. And say my friend is someone that doesn't know how to cook, but they've always wanted to learn how to make this specific thing. So I say, instead of us trying to decide between a restaurant neither of us is happy with, I go, why don't you come over and we actually cook a meal together? And the reason this yields us a win to the power of win is because the aim of getting dinner with the friend was social interaction and us connecting and bonding, right? Now we've actually done an activity, we've participated in an activity together, we've connected more, we've bonded over this shared experience, we've had something more engaging, more interactive, and we've got to have the social experience, and we've got to have the conversation as we go in a more maybe in a more relaxed environment. I've also now shared a skill with a friend that they might pass on or they might use in their day-to-day life. And again, this is just an example, but it's really about me going into the week, training my brain and my eye to go, okay, even though I've come up to a this or that kind of decision, what are the options that I'm not seeing that can help me get a exponentially better result or a win to the power of win?
And for me, I think I'll endeavor to this week look for opportunities to pour into someone or someone's that don't have an obvious link to my own life and my own goals or my own thriving. I think back to an example many years ago when I lived in KZN in Queensborough, and there was a car guard at our local Pick and Pay shopping center who was just brilliant. He was so warm. He was so focused on getting to know people, but also just being of service, and he was there for a few years. And I started getting quite close to him and friendly with him. Cal and I actually used to buy stationery for his son, Sean, who was little and starting to go into school. And then one day I went in, and it had been a while since I'd seen him, and I asked someone, where's Sammy? And they said, no, Sammy was actually studying IT for the last few years, and he's found a job. He's qualified and he's now found a job in IT. And I reflected on it and I thought, one, it was so beautiful that you never really know the whole of someone. Even if you try to get to know them, they're so layered and so multidimensional. You just don't know who people are and what amazing things they're focused on and will continue to grow and become. The other thing I reflected on was, whilst I thought I was pouring myself into him by building that relationship, getting to know his family life, supporting in some way, he actually poured into me because I learned so much about customer experience from him. I learned about sales strategy. I learned how he made everybody feel like they were, had a special relationship with him. Meanwhile, he was that way with everyone. People would park wherever he was, whichever area he was looking after, simply because they wanted to support him and have that engagement with him. And so it's a great example of how an interaction like that, when you give and someone else is giving you, just pouring into each other, you can't see the benefit, but it flows into your life experience in such awesome ways. Fast forward to current day and a few years in recent years, when I said goodbye to and farewell to some of my previous leaders and mentors in the work relationship, one of the things I've been saying, and is an ethos for me, is part of their legacy they will never see because they've poured into me and into so many others. It's not clear, it's not clearly defined as their goals or their achievements, but their legacy is actually anything I achieve, they own a part of that success because they've poured into me so beautifully. And so I want to continue doing that, pour my time and resources and just unabashedly into one or two people that don't have an obvious link to my achievements or success, knowing that as I give to others, I may never see the results of it, but I know that it uplifts by what they'll create for others and paying it forward in turn. So that'll be my endeavor for the week.
Wow, guys, those are some really inspiring actions for the week. And I love how we've been able to just take this massive concept and turn it into really practical steps that we're going to take. So thank you. Thank you, team, for the time. Thank you for the conversation. It was amazing. Guys, that's it for episode 3 of the Emergent Humanity Code podcast. Thank you to every single one of you that takes the time to be here with us, to unpack these big concepts, and then actually go out in the world and try to do something that makes a little bit of a difference. So thank you so much for that. Please remember to catch us here every second week. We'd love for you to join the community. We're on all social platforms, so the links will always be in the descriptions. We're also looking to host some community events really soon, so please let us know in the comments if you'd want to be a part of an Emergent Humanity Code event near you, and we will absolutely work towards making that happen. So thank you again, team, and thank you, everyone, and see you soon.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, guys.
Bye,
Bye,
guys.
everybody.